Hi everyone, I wanted to do a video about social media and specifically Twitter, or X as it is now. And that's just because I suppose in the last month I've been attempting to use Twitter and I've always struggled with it. I don't really know how I'm supposed to promote myself or anything on Twitter. So I had been trying to learn the way to use it over the last couple of weeks really, and I do use social media. YouTube, where I watch sort of gardening and various homesteading channels. Then I use BitChute, which I tend to use for uploaded documentaries. I quite like them. And then Rumble, I tend to follow the people who are a little bit questioning, maybe of the conspiratorial mindset. So that's what I use for social media, and that's why I use them. And I was trying to learn how to use Twitter, and I have used it before, and I don't use it for very long. It's like all social media, it's like Facebook. I really don't like Facebook either. Really always struggled with that. And what I hadn't realised, because I don't really follow our own British politics anymore, I hadn't realised that it was our election. I knew that things were being posted through my letterbox about who to vote for, but I hadn't realised that it was upcoming very shortly. And when I do get those sorts of letters, I just chuck them in the bin, and I don't tend to open my mail all that much because it's just junk. So I got into this situation where I just don't open my mail anymore, and that was because I was self-representing that rape case of mine. So I got into this sort of fear and dread of opening mail because I was always panicking about what the CICA was making claims about and what their experts were saying about me. So I really sort of started to struggle with opening my mail and email. So I didn't realise that it was the election really, and I didn't know that all this, I kind of knew that elections were coming in soon, but I didn't know when, and I still don't know when the US election is, but obviously it's going to be quite soon. I'm not sure if it's this year, maybe next year, maybe 2026, I don't know, but I haven't really been following it all, let's say. So I got onto Twitter, and what I noticed was that it's a really vile, nasty place. Like, everyone is very segmented and stuck in their views, and I do see that in the comment sections of YouTube channels which I had used to watch, and the ones on Rumble. Maybe not so much on Rumble, but on BitChute I notice it, and I don't really like it. It makes me feel uneasy. It makes me feel quite depressed, actually. So I really do struggle with social media. And I did notice this sort of vile nastiness. It was vicious, actually, on both sides, all sides. And this is what I noticed, I think, when I started out doing my channel several years ago. I did go onto Twitter and I was shocked by how nasty it was in its ways. And then it's also got a lot of hypocrites within it. So on this occasion, there's a lot of people in alternative media who are saying that what they call the mainstream alternative media is cross-promoting. Well, that's always been the case. That has always been the case, that there is cross-promotion within social media. I try to get people to talk to me in alternative media who were saying that they were upset with what was going on with the mass rapes happening in Europe. And as a victim and as someone who couldn't find representation, I was taking my story to them, and I was being ignored, basically. I was emailing them, I was commenting to them, everything. I was being ignored by the people who said that they were really upset and bothered and cared about it. So at the same time, they would be cross-promoting their mates. And I have found that social media is very, very clicky place. And I'm not very good with clickiness. I never have been. I've been probably a bit of a loner in many ways. And I'm very content with that. It's something that I've adapted to. I'm not even sure that I've adapted to or accepted as such. I think it's just me, and I'm okay with that. I suppose what you notice in media, like in movies and things like that, is you'll always get the loner, or the person, the character who's been alone for many, many years. They've been alone, the loner, and they're like this shaking wreck with wide eyes and fearful looking. And I can't say that that is me. I wouldn't say that I was a wreck, an emotional wreck. I am about certain things, but they are, I would say, justified, what I'm upset about. It's not I'm upset about being alone. What I have noticed is that in my real life world, I do have a lot of friends I did have a lot of friends who were Asian or immigrants. And I think that's just because of where I lived. And when I was doing my law degree, there were a lot of Asians on that degree, on that course. Loads of them. In fact, the course covered the Sharia law being brought into our legal system, which was a shock to my tutor, who was sort of thinking that would never happen. Anyway, I'm sort of going off track there, and I'll come back to that another time in another video. In my real life friendships, I did lose friendships because of what had happened to me, because they felt that it was racist of me to say so, what had happened. They felt that I had become a racist, which I don't believe I had done. So I started to notice that I was losing friendships a ton at a time, round about 2015. And that's probably when I started using social media, but probably more YouTube. And then, of course, YouTube started bringing in its censorship surrounding wrong thought or wrong think. But I think one of the issues that I have with alternative media at the moment is their outcry against cross-promotion when they have done it all along, because it makes them hypocrites. And I don't feel guilty for saying that. And I do feel that if I'm thinking it, then other people are thinking it as well. Because one of the things that I noticed when the referendum happened in the UK, I was thinking, well, I'm gonna say, yeah, I want to be out of the EU. I knew that they were all saying, oh, well, everyone's going to be voting to stay in. But in my head, I was thinking, well, I can't be the only person out there who wants to leave the EU. There must be plenty of people. So I don't feel guilty for saying that the alternative media has heavily cross-promoted in the past. And I still see it today. The people who are complaining about cross-promotion by the likes of Elon Musk and what have you, they are still cross-promoting themselves. So I don't know why they are objecting to it. I suppose one of their concerns is that these people may be using the title of alternative media, but in effect they are. They aren't using mainstream media outlets, they're using alternative media outlets to get their message across. And these people, they have millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of followers. And in comparison, some of these people complaining about them are small fish. But in comparison to me, they are very influential because they've got tens of thousands of followers or hundreds of thousands of followers. So I think from my perspective, with regards to all of this hypocrisy, because I see it all as hypocrisy by everyone, and I'm probably a hypocrite as well, because I have hopes and expectations maybe that I shouldn't do, and that makes me a hypocrite, and I can understand that. But when I was gone from the internet, I'd obviously had to go through my court case, had to self-represent that, and that was really, really tough. And it was quite soul destroying, but I laid out some excellent arguments and I won. And I was really proud of myself that I'd managed to do that. And then also I moved, and then my sister died. And I've been through quite a lot in that time, but I haven't really, what I noticed was that my mental health, despite everything, being offline, my mental health improved so drastically that I was able to deal with all those sorts of things. You know, moving is very, very stressful, but I was able to cope with it very, very well and very organised and everything. And losing a sibling, you know, is very, very distressing and upsetting. And I've managed to cope with that incredibly well, especially considering that I've lost all my friendships since, you know, outing myself as a rape victim of an illegal immigrant. And I managed to fight my own court case. And I don't think that I would have been able to do any of that if I'd remained on social media. And one of my videos that I've done on my other channel is about mathematics, because mathematics was objected to by the Protestants within the Christian church, all the way back in like 1000 BC, around about that time. So we didn't really have mathematics at that time, or that kind of, I don't really know how they dealt with this. This is one of the things which I need to look into. How did they, you know, buy and sell? How did they trade? And I suppose it must have been barter. But how do they know that it was a fair barter? I don't know. I'd like to look into all of that. But they really objected to mathematics and arithmetic techniques coming from the Arabic world. And I'm just sort of wondering if they had some foresight into where algorithms will take us, because, you know, it's all like a ledger. You record everything, it's all data. That's what the Normans brought in with their doomsday book and everything. So obviously there was a life of absolute freedom prior to the Normans arriving, and I have my own theories about that, which I do talk about on that channel, because I'm very interested in how it all changed and what was going on beforehand, because it looks like there was 1,000 years of peace. So did they know, did they have some foresight into what algorithms and mathematics could bring? I mean, you look at the statisticians these days, like Neil Ferguson, and with his mathematical models, he was able to close down Earth. I mean, I do wonder about this kind. This isn't something that's new and popped up in my head. But anyway, I think I started using Facebook probably about 2009, maybe, something like that. And I only used it briefly. I would say a maximum of 3 years, but spaced out over various years. And I found it really difficult to deal with that, because what I was noticing was that people's personalities seemed to change. They seemed to become very egotistical, even more so than they already had been, because I don't think that the ego blew out of proportion with social media and that invention. I think it existed with the TV and probably with mass publishing, because I remember before social media even was a thing, even before the internet was a thing, people, well, my parents would always say to me, oh, what will the neighbours think of you if you do that? Oh, what will people say? So there was always that ego that existed, that controlled people. And I don't know where they picked that up from. I'm not sure if they picked that sort of concern about what the neighbours might say, whether they picked that up from TV. And it's probable that they did. And I remember as a kid, I'd be watching like children's TV, and it would all be set in schools when you watched children's TV. And, you know, there'd be the bullying, which I think all of us have been through. I mean, it's not a race issue or, you know, an ethnic issue or anything. Everyone gets bullied in school. Even the bullies get bullied in school. I mean, they get sniggered at behind their back and everything, and talked about loads. So everyone gets bullied in school. And these children's TV programs would talk about that, and then they'd all be showing all these kissing scenes, which I suppose I was slow to develop, and I just wasn't in that place. So to me, it was like, oh man, am I supposed to be doing this at this age? You know, I'd feel a lot of pressure from that, and then also I had older siblings who would be watching, you know, 15s or 18s when I was younger, and then you'd see the sex scenes on these action movies, like out of place sex scenes, and I'd be like, oh bloody hell, this is frightening, this world is frightening, I don't want to have to deal with this. And then obviously they're dealing with their sex scenes on camera, and no one's explaining to me that, you know, you don't normally do all of that in front of a camera. And I'm not saying that I did do it in front of a camera or anything like that, I didn't, but you know, as a child you're very confused by all of this stuff that you're seeing. But what I did notice was the ego, and I didn't like it. And that was basically people saying to me, it wasn't just parents, it wasn't just siblings, it was even teachers and things like that. They'd be saying, what would people think of you if they knew you'd done that? And I used to think, why does it matter what they think of me? Like, I wasn't really quite sure why it mattered, and I'm still not sure why it matters. I don't necessarily know these people, but then it made me panic, because I was thinking, well, why does it matter? Do they do something to me in the end? Do they start to destroy my life because of their thoughts about me? And does it matter that I think badly of them because they're thinking badly of me? And, you know, I've always had a questioning mind, and it's always got me into trouble in school. So, I'm supposed to be talking about Twitter here, but I'm talking about the mental health issues surrounding it. And I then started to wonder, you know, if I'm finding it so tough within, you know, just a month maybe that I've used it, and then within the last week I've sort of understood how to use it, and I've started trying to sort of have responses to people, then if my mental health declined quickly in that period of a week or so, then those people who are solely on Twitter and everything else, where is their head at? And I'm not just talking about alternative media who I follow, but also the other people, like, you know, those who really get their claws out as well. So on the other side of the argument, Owen Jones is his name, I think so, and Lily Allen, they are very trolling in their ways, maybe. I don't know if they are purposefully like they are or whether they believe it. They may very well believe that their way is a good and kind way. I don't know. But then if you're responding to people like that, they're not going to change. They are going to continue as they are. You can't talk sense into those people. And then it becomes your group. Okay, so then it's like your alternative media, your conspiracy theorists, your alt-right, your far-right. I don't know whether they're the same things or not. I haven't got a clue. And then, you know, assuming that they are all separate ideas and ideologies and philosophies and everything, then you have those people who are, you know, cross-promoting. And then you've got those people who are trying to have a conversation with them because it relates to what they're talking about, and they're being ignored. And then you get this new popping up group of people who are saying, well, you know, you're hypocrites too. I think everyone is a hypocrite. I don't think we can help that. And I don't know how people are going to deal with that, because it's one of the most frustrating things about humanity, because the arguments, and very good arguments, on the side of conspiracy theorists and right wing and left wing, I do think that they have good arguments too. The difficulty with them is that we are all hypocrites, and most of our arguments are based on the other side, or the people who we're criticising, being a hypocrite. And I think that's why I had chosen to disappear from social media, because it was full of so many hypocrites. And I think that that's why I started writing in the end, because I wanted to sort of look into these hypocritical ideas and how they work, and how people with a certain belief system, how will they deal with certain situations as they arise. So that's what I write about. I try to write about cognitive dissonance, situations of that arising within society. And that's been very, very therapeutic to me. Obviously, you get to sort of look into character development and all of that. But the difficulty is that if you're going to be writing stories and books and things like that, then presumably it's a good idea to sell them so that you can make money from them. But to do that, you have to either go to a publisher who will then sort of edit it all and probably completely change the story from what it had been. And that's one of my biggest fears, because I wanted them to be honest stories reflecting honest behaviours of people within society. And then I want them also to be kind of I'm nervous about that. So maybe I'll write a few books and see whether any publisher would be interested after I've written quite a few. But one of the things about self-publishing is that you have to promote yourself. And doing that, you have to go on social media. And it seems to me that I'm just not suitable for social media. I'm not suitable for this world. I'm just not. It's a bloody awful world. And the world itself is beautiful. But society is just pretty nasty, really. Even from before school. Like I was picking up on people's strange behaviours when I was a toddler, you know, because... And it wasn't just my parents, because I've noticed it since I've had my son. And I know I always promised myself that I wouldn't do this with my own son, because I found it to be horrible to be in that situation myself, where I was the butt of a joke for my parents when they were trying to sort of amuse other people. They'd sort of say, oh yes, well, you know, there was this occasion where she had terrible diarrhea. Let me tell you about this time she had diarrhea. Oh, it was hilarious. Everyone gather round. Let's look at her. Yeah, that one. Yeah, she had this terrible diarrhea and oh, it went everywhere. Oh, let's all laugh at her. That kind of thing. And I noticed it with my son's friend's mum, and this was in primary school. I mean, it does hopefully die off. It didn't really die off with me. And you kind of see this behaviour of parents in television. You see it in like the royal family, where they are telling Anthony, get the kettle on, do all of this work, be the one who's peeling the potatoes. You know, it's with him. You see it in movies with like Bridget Jones, where they sort of crack jokes about, and she's, oh yeah. and the kids don't respond. And I noticed it when I was walking home with the kids and the parents, and then one of the parents would say, "Oh, look at my son, he's so fat, isn't he? Oh, I don't know what to do about him, he's so fat though." And they'd just say it really, really loud. And I found that to be awful, because I've been there myself and I found it humiliating and degrading. And I always said to my son, I won't ever do that to you. And if I do it, please pick me up on it and say, "Mum, you really embarrassed me when you did that. Can you not do it again?" And I said, I promised not to shout, because I had told people that they'd embarrassed me when they'd done that. And they started shouting and saying no, they hadn't. And I was there telling them, "Yeah, you have done. You've shouted at me and you've embarrassed me." And this is what you get on social media as well. You get these people who you might say, "Oh, you've embarrassed me," or you've sort of shamed me a little bit, and they'll go off their heads. But it's easier to do it on social media because you're not face to face with each other. But I don't feel that it's necessarily changed anything. I think it's just amplified the ego within society to a far massive extent than what it had been already. Because I completely feel that it's so wrong to mock a child for your own ego, or maybe, I don't know why they do that. I mean, I'm thinking specifically about a time when I was walking home with my son, his friend, and his friend's mum from school, and she was just ranting on about how fat her son was, and he was overweight, but she was saying, "Oh, I don't know why." And in my head, I was just thinking, well, it's because you're feeding him too much. And you could see his shame and embarrassment, and I really felt for him. And what he started doing eventually was bullying my son in school, possibly as an outlet of finding a way to deal with his own humiliation that he was suffering at home. Or maybe he wasn't suffering that constantly, but he was suffering it on occasions when his mum was out with friends, because I know that she was quite a social person and she regularly had friends around with her, and they'd always sort of be, going on outings with people, and she'd regularly humiliate her son like that, which I found quite disgraceful behaviour. Having been through that situation myself and really fully empathising with the child that he was and that I was at that time. And I'm not sure that you can necessarily empathise with that situation unless you've been through it. And if you have been through it, are you less likely to do it? Or are you more likely to do it? Because sometimes you find that people who have been abused continue that abuse, although some people don't. And I don't really know the statistics on that. But basically, this is quite a all over the place random video. But I have been feeling stressed from using Twitter, and it's just sort of provoked all these memories in me, as well as noticed that those people who claim to be just aren't necessarily just, or they are hypocrites while they complain about hypocrites. And I do find it very frustrating, and I'm glad that a few years ago I stopped social media use. I don't think I will stop it, but I'm going to recognise that people don't want to cross promote. They want to cross promote, but they don't want others to cross promote. And ultimately, what I notice about society is on all sides is that there is a case a strong case of arguments with everyone, but it's okay when I do it. It's okay when we do it. And I noticed that with the elections for the UK and France. So I think Marine Le Pen was winning, and then all the left-wing people, they gathered together and they were able to get the votes from the people. I think what they did was they did it strategically. So they made sure that they dropped some candidates in some areas so that the alternative was a different a left-wing party and a strong, likely to win left-wing candidate, rather than putting these lesser candidates in place. So they managed to win strategically, and a lot of people objected to that. But that's exactly what happened in 2019, I think. Was that the last election before now? So Reform was supposed to be having candidates in various different places, but they dropped their candidates in much of the UK so that the Tories would win. And I very much had a sense when that happened in France that the right wing had sort of, especially the populists, had not acknowledged that that happened with the Reform in a previous election too. And it was that, actually, that act by Reform in order to get a Tory win, which made me realise that democracy was a fraud and that I wouldn't be voting in an election again, because that kind of manipulation is evidence to me enough that we don't live in the society that we're being convinced that we do live in. We don't live in a democracy, because that was complete manipulation. And what I'm noticing is that that kind of manipulation is okay on occasions for people, but it's not okay when the other side does it. And so there is all this hypocrisy, and it's very frustrating to be observing it. And I know that most people on the internet are actually observers. Most people don't do too much in the way of discussion. They do keep themselves to themselves. I'm not sure if that's because their username is their actual name. I don't think so. I'm not sure why it is, but it's interesting anyway. The whole thing, the whole experience, and it's only been about a month, maybe even less than that. But I know that I started to recognise the issues once again just prior to the election. So it certainly wasn't a month. It was about a week ago. And it just took me aback, really. I was really surprised by how down it got me, how I'm seeing massive contradictions on both sides and hypocrisy. And, I just found that fascinating. Human nature is fascinating, isn't it? Anyway, I'll leave it there. I've got more to talk about on this, but it's running a bit long, so I don't want to bore you, and I don't want to keep on rambling on different subjects, going all over the place. Alright, thank you. Well, comment, like, subscribe and share. Thanks. Bye.